and welcome to Shikha Joe, my personal vlog of following God's calling back to education at Moody Bible Institute. Today, I am launching a new little series inside Shikha Joe, which is called Friday Reflections. And I am currently sitting in my lounge, so if somebody walks in or you hear a little bit of noise, it's because I'm in the lounge. No one's in here now, but I hear people walking around the lounge, so I'm thinking that somebody's going to walk in here eventually, sooner or later. But with that said, that's why I'm surrounded by fish. If you don't know Moody culture, Moody Bible Institute has dorm floors, and each floor has a mascot, and our mascot is the sailors. So we have a very nautical lounge with fish and sharks and fish. So with that said, Friday Reflections is, I think, going to be one of my favorite parts because Friday is the one weekday that I don't have any classes. And because I don't have any classes on Fridays, I'm going to just kind of get on the vlog and share one thing that I've learned this week from one of the classes that I enjoyed. So this week's kind of Friday reflection, what I was thinking about was, because it was hard because we didn't have as many classes because Monday was a holiday, MLK Day. And so we only had 3 days worth of classes. But again, I want to just share one thing that I learned for you guys. And maybe you guys will learn something and maybe it'll be interesting, or maybe it'll just be a virtual time capsule for me to go back and see each week what I learned, which I think would be also fun. So who knows? Anyways, this week, my Friday reflection will come from my New Testament survey class with Professor Mikel Del Rosario. And in that class, we learned about, well, first off, the challenge question that he put up on the board was, hasn't the New Testament been changed? Which is an interesting question because I just kind of always assumed, no, it hasn't been changed. You know, it's the Bible. Like, what do you think? But then he went a step further and he was talking about footnotes. And I feel like, I don't know about you, but for me, footnotes have always just been a thing in the Bible. Like, I just see it, I see the little thing, and sometimes I'll look down and I'll read it, sometimes I won't. I'm just like, okay, whatever, I take it for what it is. Now, the footnotes were really interesting because, again, I've never really focused on footnotes and what they are. So when he talked about footnotes, I was like, okay, great, let's get into it. And the verse that he had on there was the verse of the day for the class was Romans 5:1. And Romans 5:1 is, therefore, since we have been justified through faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. And believe it or not, there's a little footnote in here. And the footnote says 5:1. Many manuscripts let us, meaning that instead of saying we have peace with God, it says let us have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. So, what does that mean? Footnotes. The Bible was translated and it was handwritten. Most translators were doing it on paper, and they were typically doing it in their laps, writing like this with maybe candlelight and nothing else. So most translators were tired. They were, some might even say tired. I don't know where I was going with that. They were tired, and sometimes they make mistakes. And some might even say errors. And a lot of people like to nitpick those errors and say those errors mean that the New Testament Bible is unreliable. It's not, we can't take it for word. We can't trust it. It's been changed. But in reality, out of 400,000 variants of the Bible, 99% of variants make virtually no difference at all. What does that mean? Well, first off, variants. Professor Del Rosario talked about variants as kind of like Marvel, how there's different characters have different variants, right? And so there are slight changes and variations to alter the Bible. However, there's no significant doctrine change. The change or alterations that happen are not to doctrine. They are grammatical. They are sometimes slight punctuation. And those are the errors or the mistakes in copying the Bible. And these are errors and changes like mistakes that are copied, not factual errors. So again, 99% out of the 400,000 variants or footnotes that exist in the Bible change virtually no difference in doctrine. It changes nothing significant in the Bible or what we believe. For example, the footnote of Romans 5:1, whether it is we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, or let us have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Regardless of which variant you use, the doctrine stays the same. The end all is that we can have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ because we have been justified through faith. That variation makes zero difference at all. So, what does that entail? Well, one of the key terms that we learned was textual criticism. Textual criticism is errors are changes like mistakes in copying, not factual errors. Not or. Errors are changes like mistakes in copying, not factual errors. And he gave us this little graph down here in the corner. And the graph is neither meaningful nor viable changes. And then in that, this little tiny blue sliver, there's others, is meaningful and viable, which is 1% of changes or variants in the Bible. So with that said, there are 5,800 Greek manuscripts, 10,000 Latin manuscripts, and 10,000 additional ancient versions. However, so because of that, the New Testament is the best attested text of the ancient world. So obviously, if something is super ancient, like the Bible is, there's bound to be translation errors, right? And honestly, because a lot of it goes back to language, because some of the Bible is written in Hebrew, some of it's written in Greek. Well, in both Greek and Hebrew, the language is a lot more complex than English, just like there are several ways and several words to describe love in not only the Bible, but just in the language in general. But in English, we have one word, love. That's it, right? You love your family, you love your siblings, family and siblings are the same thing. Sorry. You love your siblings, you love your family, you love maybe your spouse, but that's going to be a different love than your family. I should hope so. But the reality is that there are different language nuances that are in the Bible that you don't capture in the English language. And one thing that Professor Del Rosario did talk about was that kind of like if somebody had an apple pie recipe, he gave this example. I actually really liked it. If somebody were to give an apple pie recipe, and let's say your grandma had an apple pie recipe, and let's say her daughter copied it, and maybe instead of saying peel and chop the apples at the beginning, she put chop and peel. Obviously, that's not right because you can't, or it's easier to peel it than chop it than it is to chop it than peel it. So obviously that can't be right. But then let's say we can look at, Uncle took down the recipe, and Uncle's recipe says peel and chop. And let's say another aunt were to have written down the recipe, and Aunt's recipe says peel and chop. By taking those copies, we can make it back to the original text of seeing what was probably accurate. Or let's say at the end of Aunt's recipe, it says best apple pie in the world. Well, if we look at all the other copies and it does not say that, then we can make the assumption or the inference, the factual-based inference that this is the best apple pie in the world is not in the original copy of the recipe. So kind of like looking at the variants, we can take all the different samples and different copies of translations and text and be able to get to the original document. And that was kind of the whole preface of that lesson in New Testament Survey. I really enjoyed it. I think this is probably going to be one of my more favorite classes. I also really enjoyed Professor Del Rosario. I was able to hear him speak when I came for the Moody Experience, and he had a really good little mini lesson at the Moody Experience, and I'm really excited to be taking his class because he does a really good job at speaking, conveying, and he's also just a really interesting person. He also has social media and a podcast called at The Apologetics Guy. So if anybody wants to go look him up and listen to his podcast, he has really good content on the podcast too. But that's just one thing that I learned that was interesting. I'm really excited for Friday Reflections, I think it's going to be a really cool part of the vlog, where other people can maybe learn something new, follow along with my education journey, and learn something new with me. And I'm only going to bring you the interesting stuff, so you don't have to sit through some of the boring classes like I do. You can actually just get right to the meat and potatoes of some of the interesting things that I enjoyed learning. But that was this week's Friday Reflection. I look forward to next week's Friday Reflection as we gear up. This is my first full week of classes. Obviously, this last week was my first week of classes. This is my first full week of classes, so we'll see how it goes. Other than that, look forward to a regular vlog episode soon. Thanks so much for watching, and have a good night.